Hey, welcome to your lunch hour. It is 12:05. This is an ongoing conversation. I made the comment a couple of days ago on the show, and I got an email from a friend of mine with regional police. He wasn't criticizing the comment. He was saying how typical the comment. I had said, as of this past April, I've now had a valid driver's license for 40 years. I have one speeding ticket in 40 years. My comment was, doesn't mean I've only sped just once in 40 years. It means, and this is the embarrassing part. I told my wife I talked about this on the air, and she said, you have to explain the circumstances again. I don't want to explain the circumstances again. We'd moved back to Ontario from the prairies. Both of our boys were quite young. We flew back to the prairies for a family vacation. My wife is from a place called North Battleford, Saskatchewan. And we're going back to Saskatoon, which is about an hour and a half drive. Of course, if you know that part of the country, you can pretty much see Saskatoon from North Battleford. The road's that flat. I got a speeding ticket in my father-in-law's K car. Now, how embarrassing is that? Only speed ticket I've ever had. My point is speed limits. We've talked about this a few times. The speed limits are for the few, not the many. And now I see a couple of groups calling for higher speed limits on major highways. 100stop100.ca, and the 100 is in reference to the speed limit, is one group. Another group is sense.bc.org. Ian Tootill joins us from beautiful British Columbia. Now, I've been to beautiful British Columbia. If I'm in Vancouver and I'm driving, say, right up the coast to Whistler, you can't see Whistler from there. And the highway's a little bit different. So I understand, but I also value the fact that I feel like I know what I'm doing. Ian, you're new to the show, so you've never heard me say this before, but trust me, if everybody drove as well as I did, there'd be no need for car insurance.
Yeah, I say the same thing too, Gary.
We all say the same thing, don't we?
I just like to address one thing.
Okay.
Speeding tickets are a direct correlation normally to amount of time spent on the road. So the more time you spent on the road, the more opportunity for you to have a ticket, and the more opportunity for you to have a crash, not necessarily an at-fault crash. And it's at fault that we're trying to work on here. And speed has always been the sort of the demon that in Canada and in the U.S. for a number of years we seem to have gone after. And it's not the demon that they're making it out to be. And both our groups, sense.bc and stop100.ca, are calling for speed limit, realistic speed limits.
What is today, given today's automobile and the condition of today's road, what's an ideal speed limit?
Well, it depends on the road, and it depends on a number of factors. But the 400 series highways that Chris Klimek and stop100.ca are talking about are freeways that are designed with limited interactions between drivers in mind. In other words, you've got divided highways, you've got paved medians, you've got rumble strips on the side of the road, so if people fall asleep, they get woken up. You've got limited access, fences often on the side of the road, so you don't have the opportunity for collisions. So typically, people will drive faster on those roads, and there is a flow of traffic. There's a natural flow of traffic on all roadways, and you mentioned it. Speed limits on the highways are for the chosen few. I mean, few people are obeying them in Canada. It's not just in Ontario, but we have the same issue in BC. You mentioned Whistler. We had a road to Whistler that was quite dangerous, and it was posted at 80 kilometers an hour. And the British Columbia government, prior to the Olympics, spent almost $1 billion on improving that road. They created, divided highway with beautiful bank curves, long sight lines, again, very few entry and exit points, and they kept the 80 kilometer an hour speed limit. So now everybody's doing anywhere from 110 to 120 on that road, and yet our speed is posted at 80, so they're making everybody a lawbreaker.
See, that's the part I don't get, because, my mom lives in Eastern Ontario, and I live in Western Ontario. I don't get to see her that often, and I've already said I've only had one speeding ticket, but it doesn't mean it's the only time I've sped. From my house in Kitchener, Waterloo to Kingston, it was about a 4.5, 5 hour drive. 3 weeks ago, I left very early on a Sunday morning, just as the sun was coming up. I got there in 3 hours. There was nobody else on the road. So where's my compulsion to drive at 100? You know what? You understand what I'm saying?
Like, yeah. Well, you're preaching to the converted, of course. There is. This is a tough one. There are a lot of interests at stake here. There's a big industry behind speed enforcement, and that industry has an interest in keeping speed limits artificially low. And it goes everywhere from the insurance companies that in the U.S. can increase your insurance premium up to 50% for just one or two traffic infractions, which typically are speeding tickets. It's the people that make the devices to go and catch these people, and it's the law enforcement that get to hire more people and buy more equipment and justify their existence and remain visible by conducting useless, often, traffic safety exercises.
But Ian, I was a fan of photo radar in Ontario because my attitude was it only catches the guilty, and they can allow police to actually do other meaningful work. Not that speed control isn't meaningful work, but I don't know how familiar you are with Highway 400 in Ontario that starts in the middle of Toronto and goes straight north up to cottage country.
Yep.
What cracks me up, honestly cracks me up, is the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police. They always put out a warning on a long weekend that they're going to be watching for speeders on the 400. You know the average speed on the 400 on a long weekend is about 30K because of volume?
Yeah.
And yet they're out there with, they're warning us about speeding.
Yeah, no, I used to, I lived in Toronto at one point, and I remember Sunday nights coming back from Barrie, and it was
it's not any better, by the way. It's not any better, by the way.
But just to address not to dwell on it, but to address your point about photo radar, it does have problems, and it doesn't only catch the guilty. It's been known to malfunction. There are issues with photo radar, but there wouldn't be the kind of backlash against things like photo radar if the speed limits were set properly in the first place. And there is a methodology to setting speed limits. And the internationally accepted methodology, which is put forth by the Institute for Transportation Engineers, is something called the 85th percentile.
Right.
And it's where you go out and you measure the free flow of speed or a free flow of traffic over a number of months at different times, and you take the upper end of travel speed of those vehicles, and that's where you set the limit. And typically what happens is you tighten up the bell curve of travel speed. That means that there are less scofflaws, and there's more uniformity in traffic speed, and it's much easier to identify the people that are really causing the problem if you set the limits properly.
So then the question is, who gets to decide what the limits are properly? Because I don't have a big car. I've got a 4-cylinder car. I've never tested it, but I know I can get it to 150 in a hurry if I have to. So why are we building cars that tempt a guy like me to do that?
Well, car manufacturers build what consumers demand. Politicians, though, don't necessarily respond to what their consumers are looking for. And speed limits are set politically; they're set in statute. So, there are, roadways are built with certain speeds in mind, and the Highway 400. I'm not quite familiar with what the design speed of that road is, but it's probably in excess of 100 kilometers an hour, and that just means the design speed for all
Sure.
vehicles, and that includes heavy trucks that take 10 times as long to stop as small cars with good brakes.
Now, I've been doing some research on this, and we talked last month with an American highway expert, because a big chunk of the interstate that goes through Texas has now set its speed limit at 80 miles an hour.
85.
85?
Yeah.
Even better. So, if they think that's safe, and safety experts will tell you if you crash it at 100 kilometers an hour with airbags and with everything else going, you have an opportunity to maybe not walk away, but you have an opportunity to survive it. If you're doing the same thing at 130K, you're likely not to survive it. Where's the argument to be made for safety?
That's the argument. The argument is the faster you go, the more damage you do. Therefore, slow everybody down. When they eventually hit each other, they will do less damage, and we will have more survivors. Our argument is let's work on not eliminating, but minimizing the possibility for interactions and crashes in the first place. And you do that by setting speed limits that minimize speed variance. So, if everybody's doing 130 on, say, the Highway 400 on a good day, and you've set the speed limit at 100, Who's the ass? Is it the law that set, the legislators that set the speed limit at 100, or is it all the drivers that are doing what seems natural and normal and safe to them? Who's in the best position to judge what the best speed is for your vehicle? It's the driver of the car, based on the condition of the vehicle, based on the type of vehicle, based on the weather conditions, based on the traffic patterns, based on road conditions, all kinds of different conditions. Those are the people that make the choice, and they choose with their right foot. And on any given day in British Columbia anyway, on our highways, you've got roughly 70% of drivers in noncompliance traveling significantly above the posted speed limits.
Yeah, and that's just in the school zones.
Yeah, well, we're not talking about school zones, because often these people will,
I jest.
You jest, but a lot of people will try and mix that argument. They'll start bringing into it municipal zones, school zones, playgrounds. We're not talking about municipal streets. We're talking about highways that are built for speed. Speed is a good thing. We build, we have airports and we have planes that are designed to go, hundreds of miles an hour. And, speed doesn't kill. Speed gets people to where they want to go. It's when you stop and hit something that you have a problem.
Where's the middle ground here, Ian? Because that's generally what happens. I mean, one group says this is what we want. These are the freedoms we demand. A legislative body says this is what we're prepared to offer you. So somewhere in the middle, there's a compromise.
There doesn't need to be a compromise. I mean, there just needs to be a commitment to setting speed limits using science instead of using politics as the basis. So, if we agree that we're going to, use empirical safety foundations for our decisions, then the answers become pretty clear. If not, then we have to ask ourselves why we're building these expensive highways. These are world-class highways in Ontario, and some of the highways in BC are as well. And, let's allow drivers, let's permit people to travel at the speeds that they're designed for and that they want to travel at. I've got to look at the history here. The history behind this, really, it's quite short. I mean, what happened was in the early 70s, there was an oil embargo, there was a shortage, and the federal government in the U.S. mandated a 55-mile-an-hour limit to save fuel. And when they did that, they forced all the states to do the same. And it's taken a long time after the fact for states to break out of that sort of cultural, norm that they got used to, and fight all the forces. The insurance companies, the traffic safety people, the people manufacturing the devices, law enforcement, all the special interests that have tried to keep it down. And right across the U.S. now, you're seeing limits go anywhere from they've gone up from 55 to 65, 75, even 85 miles an hour, as you've seen in Texas and Utah. And they haven't had the carnage that all these people have been telling us that we would have.
Right. Ian, I got to wrap up, but Tim just sent in a question he wants answered. What about maximum and minimum speed limits? Quebec does that. Would that help?
Sure. Yeah, lots of European countries do that. Also, uniformity on the roads helps, like lane discipline. If you're going slower, then you stay to the right. If you're passing, then you get in the left-hand lane.
Oh, come on, you're kidding now. People actually do that?
Yeah, well, they do in the U.S. and they do in many places in Europe.
But here, okay, let me give you this anecdote. We were in South Carolina to visit friends, and that was my discovery that if you stay right except to pass, it actually works. We crossed back into Canada at Buffalo onto the QEW. Everybody makes a beeline for the left lane. Yeah. There's
a video that we just posted on the Sense.bc Facebook page this morning that was in a local paper, and it's a video taken locally where a car attempts to pass a vehicle on the right-hand side. The vehicle cuts in, the car loses it and does a flip and ends up on the side of the road. And that's it's a graphic illustration of why you need to stay right except to pass, why passing on the right should be illegal, and why it should be illegal to occupy the left-hand lane unless you need to pass.
If it wasn't for them, my road rage would be long gone. Ian Tootill, Thank you. Great to get you on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Ian is with a group called sense.bc.org. They're in cohorts with their Ontario version. Let me look up their webpage. Stop100.ca. The Stop 100 is to stop the speed limit of 100 on the 400 series. What do you think? Are speed limits artificially low? Is that the problem? Your calls are next. Coming up, the Golf Show with Ian Leggett and Scott Metcalf, brought to you by Golf North on 570 News.
Who's in the best position to judge what the best speed is for your vehicle? It's the driver of the car, based on the condition of the vehicle, based on the type of vehicle, based on the weather conditions, based on the traffic patterns, based on road conditions, all kinds of different conditions. Those are the people that make the choice, and they choose with their right foot.
Okay, so are speed limits artificially low then? This is what these two groups, one in Ontario, one in BC, are saying. Speed limits are just too low. What this does, by setting speed limits at 100, you are making lawbreakers out of 70% of motorists who believe they're still safe and quite capable of holding onto an automobile somewhat north of 100. 519-570-2545 in town. Out of town, toll free, 1-800-570-5715. Cell phone number, hands free. It's star 570. And you can email the show. Just go to Gary at 570news.com. And I'm on Twitter at Gary Doyle 570. Bob says, the one time I was caught speeding, it was the fact that I was late for an appointment because I spent an unreasonable time behind a slow driver. Sorry, Bob, it might have been me. Alex, what do you think?
Well, I thought that was just an awesome guest. I liked what he had to say, and I think his biggest comment was, if you just look at the science and base your decisions on that, you will come to the same conclusions that we have. And that, unfortunately, is a huge societal problem. We don't use that anymore. He's 100% correct. You let the science decide the speed limits, and then you go from there. And if they did that, yeah, you know what? Sure, bring in photo radar. I really don't care if the numbers are correct. But that actually, the point he brought up there is a huge point. I hate to make this a left-right issue, but the left normally uses emotional arguments. Oh, the carnage, speed kills. Oh, we can't do that. It'll hurt people. It saves one life. It's worth it. All this nonsense. And the right seems to be now the people that look at the science. They go, no, the science is saying that this is the way it should be done, so let's do it that way. And it's these emotional arguments which should never. Emotions have their place, but they don't have a place in making logical decisions. That's the domain of science. And it'll never happen. I think they're fighting a losing battle. It will never happen because there's too many people that think with their heart and their emotions. And it's the if it saves one life crowd, unfortunately, is in charge. And unfortunately, there's just not enough of us out here to change it. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Spock. I appreciate your logical arguments as always. Bert, what do you say?
Hi.
Hey.
Oh, I wasn't sure if it was me you were talking to.
It's
Gary.
you I'm talking to, Bert. Go ahead.
Thanks. As you know, I'm a truck driver, and I have a real problem with speed limits. For one thing, they are artificially too low, absolutely without a doubt. But the problem that I see is, why do we automatically put speed limiters in big trucks and not in all the vehicles produced in North America? I mean, think of all the accidents, high-speed chases, and all the rest of that.
Well, you know,
Bert,
Bert,
eliminate if everybody was regulated.
Yeah, Bert, you and I are both the same vintage, and my dad taught me that your gas pedal gets you out of more jams than your brake does. If you're on hold, I'm sorry, we're not going to get to any more calls on this one. Leroy says this, we'll end on this email. I think highway speeds are too low. I also think some of the city speeds are too high. I don't think you can set the speed limit by the condition of the road, condition of your vehicle, and the weather, because the different speed limit would be different for everyone, and it would change every day.